USC study finds cannabis can help manage withdrawal symptoms, cravings, and anxiety after withdrawal. Research from the University of Southern California shows that cannabis helps people stop or cut down on their opioid use. We interviewed 30 people who were using opiates and cannabis and injecting drugs, said Sid Ganesh, a PhD student at USC's medical school and lead author of the study. The participants who were receiving methadone, methadone clinic and a syringe exchange in Los Angeles said cannabis was a useful tool to help manage their opiate use, in part because it has become so much easier to access in recent years. The study, published in Drug and Alcohol Dependence Reports, received federal funding from NIDA, which is more typically supported research that looks at cannabis harm rather than benefit. Notably, the study is unique because it uses qualitative data and focuses on the lived experience of people who use the drugs. Kanash said qualitative research provides insight into that actually works for study populations and why, especially when those populations are vulnerable and dealing with all kinds of issues that might not show up in a data point. 57% of participants in her study were unhoused or unstably housed, and 70% made less than $2,100 a month. To me, what this study shows is simply the qualitative difference between the millions of cannabis users and their experience and what we have the addiction industry and the medical community in some parts still pushing, which is weed is nothing but a gateway drug. And we know that it is a way outside of addiction for many of us, and it takes that edge off. And so I'm glad to see this study. There's a lot of controversy in this area, but it's good to see the NIDA finally at least fund something that looked at something positive, and that is cannabis can help many opiate users curtail their opiate use.
This is great news, Sean. This is so Sean, with how many of these types of studies does it take for the VA to make a move on it?
Well, the answer is real quick. None of these studies are going to change what the FDA says, because the studies that change what the FDA says are blind.
No, not the FDA, the VA. The VA.
The VA is going to follow the FDA, right?
Got it.
And they're
Okay.
conservative. So again, nothing's going to change until you have a double-blind study showing that cannabis is, quote, medicine. And the problem you're going to have with that is there's 250 plus compounds in cannabis. So which one of them is actually affecting the change? The problem is plant medicine is not set up for the FDA. They like the derivative, you wrap patent and IP around it. And our system is not meant to elevate in cannabis as to a medicine. In fact, it's very much the opposite. It's meant to suppress cannabis as a medicine because it's a hell of a competitive force to pharma.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
In fact, there needs to be some sort of nonprofit lobbying agency created that funnels money to a new track in the FDA doing whole plant and fungal medicines, as well as plant admixtures.
Don't you think it should just be more like the Department of Agriculture as opposed to the FDA?
The FDA is the Food and Drug Administration.
The FDA preview. It should be descheduled and outside the Controlled Substance Acts. But we also have to learn that cannabis is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the Controlled Substance Act has so distorted the natural markets of what consumers should be able to get, want to get, and what is profitable to provide. I mean, it's not a free market. It's an absolute controlled market. And it's being used for monopolistic endeavors, which is to enrich the system. In fact, very much cannabis legalization, people did not want a powerful, enriched cannabis industry, because then they can lobby. And they see what happens in alcohol. They see what happens in other drugs and in pharma. The small people who want to control everything can't control it. And that's a big problem. So they want to keep us impoverished in cannabis to make sure we can't compete.
Mm-hmm.
You're here.
Any thoughts on this, Jenny?
I mean, it's a big duh to me. Like, of course it does. And the fact that we're just now putting out studies that are showing that cannabis reduces opioid withdrawals and things like that, like, it's a huge duh. So it's not news to me until we can actually do something about it, unfortunately.
I'm just
there's a lot of really cool studies that show that in the U.S., anywhere there is a legal cannabis dispensary, there is a shadow around a dispensary where domestic violence, opioid use, and a lot of lifestyle type crimes are severely reduced.
And pregnancy rates are up too.
Oh boy!
But this is the problem.
Say hello again.
Is that a cola, or are you just happy to see me?
This is the
my
problem.
God.
We saw UC Davis come out with the suicide numbers that said where legal dispensaries are, we see lower suicide numbers, right? Or lower,
Wow.
both those things. And the problem is what the prohibitionists turned around and did was they just changed the dates, analyzing the statistics, and came up with a different conclusion, right? That it is not correlated or correlated. That's why all this research is pretty much junk, other than propaganda. Unless you're going to invest put it this way, CBD, Epidiolex took about, I think, $200 or $300 million in research to get the IP. And who is going to put that kind of money to work for a strain? Because all you get is that singular strain that goes through the study, and every other strain you can't claim as medicine.
Well, and that's because of the FDA Preclusion Act. But the Epidiolex, it's really funny because GW Pharmaceuticals patent was actually encompassed by UCAN's patent, the 9/11 patent. You guys can go read about that yourselves. But it was really cool to be sitting there in the office when GW called. So, and that was really cool because that was, once again, the industry kind of taking back what the fuck was ours and protecting it from these big pharma companies that are trying to take it and rule out anyone else being able to do that. It's a cannabinoid formulary patent. So if you look that up, you can do your own research.